Maya Chen had always believed that love was supposed to feel like coming home, but standing in her kitchen at dawn, staring at the empty bank statements scattered across her grandmother's oak table, she realized that sometimes home could become a crime scene. The numbers on the screen blurred through her tears as she traced each devastating withdrawal, each transfer to accounts she'd never seen before, each signature that belonged to her husband of 12 years. Daniel Morrison, the man who had sworn to cherish and protect her, had systematically dismantled their life while she slept, leaving behind only the hollow shell of their dreams and a mountain of debt that threatened to bury her alive. The organic farm in Willowbrook Valley had been their shared vision, born from late-night conversations about sustainable living and making a difference in their small corner of the world. Maya had poured her inheritance from her grandmother into the fertile soil, believing that Daniel's business acumen combined with her agricultural passion would create something beautiful and lasting. She had trusted him with the financial management while she focused on crop cultivation and organic certification, never imagining that trust could be weaponized against her with such calculated precision. When Daniel finally emerged from their bedroom that morning, his movements were unhurried, almost casual, as if the destruction of their marriage was merely another routine transaction. He was already dressed in his expensive suit, the one Maya had bought him for their anniversary, his hair perfectly styled and his face bearing the expression of a man preparing for just another ordinary business meeting. The sight of him triggered a visceral response in Maya, a combination of rage and disbelief that made her hands shake as she held up the damning evidence of his betrayal. "Going somewhere special?" she asked, her voice carrying a deceptive calm that belied the storm raging beneath her composed exterior. Daniel glanced at the papers in her hands and had the audacity to smile, a cold, calculating expression that transformed his familiar features into those of a stranger she no longer recognized. "Barcelona," he replied, straightening his tie with the same meticulous care he had once used to tend their relationship. "Vivian and I are launching a new venture, cryptocurrency mining with a focus on sustainable energy solutions. Quite lucrative, actually." The casual mention of Vivian Ashford, his supposed business partner and the woman Maya now realized had been sleeping with her husband for months, hit like a physical blow. Maya had met Vivian at several business functions, had even invited her to their home for dinner, never suspecting that the elegant woman with the practiced smile and expensive jewelry was systematically seducing her husband while evaluating their assets. "You're talking about my money, Daniel," Maya said, her voice rising despite her efforts to maintain composure. "My grandmother's legacy, the farm, our life." Daniel's laugh was soft but devoid of warmth, the sound of ice cracking underfoot on a winter morning. "Your grandmother's money became our money when we married, and our money became my money when I proved I was the only one capable of managing it properly," he replied, checking his watch as if this conversation was merely an inconvenient delay. "Look around, Maya. This farm was never profitable. Your organic obsession has cost us thousands in unnecessary certifications and equipment. I simply redirected our resources toward something with actual potential." The contempt in his voice cut deeper than any physical wound, reducing years of hard work and genuine passion to nothing more than an expensive hobby. Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, as if a tectonic plate in her emotional landscape had suddenly realigned. The woman who had spent years accommodating her husband's moods, minimizing her own needs, and apologizing for taking up space, began to solidify into someone entirely different. "Get out," she said, her voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable finality. "Take your things and leave, now." Daniel's expression flickered with surprise, perhaps even disappointment that she wasn't begging or crying as he might have expected. "I'll be gone within the hour," he said, his tone shifting to something almost businesslike. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. You can keep the farm, of course, along with all the associated debts. Consider it my farewell gift." With that parting cruelty, he walked out of their kitchen, out of their bedroom, where he packed his belongings with efficient precision, and ultimately out of Maya's life, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and the devastating reality of her new circumstances. The first weeks alone were a descent into a kind of hell Maya had never imagined possible. The silence in the house was oppressive, broken only by the persistent drip of water from the roof that had begun leaking during the last storm, and the occasional creak of old wood settling in ways that now sounded ominous rather than comforting. Without Daniel's income, the bills began arriving with ruthless regularity: the mortgage, the equipment loans, the certification fees, the utilities. Maya discovered debts she hadn't known existed, investments Daniel had made using the farm as collateral, promises he had signed her name to without her knowledge or consent. The electricity was shut off first, plunging the house into darkness that seemed to mirror the bleakness of her situation. Then came the water, forcing Maya to rely on the old well that required manual pumping and produced only a trickle of rusty water that tasted of metal and desperation. The phone service followed, cutting her off from the outside world and leaving her completely isolated in her crumbling sanctuary. The organic certification she had worked so hard to achieve expired when she couldn't afford the renewal fees, and the expensive equipment Daniel had insisted they purchase began to rust in the barn as Maya struggled to understand the complex machinery without his technical expertise. Food became a daily challenge as her savings dwindled and the local grocery stores stopped accepting her checks. Maya learned to forage for wild edibles, a skill her grandmother had taught her during childhood visits, but which she had never expected to need for survival. She made soup from dandelion greens and acorns, supplemented her diet with eggs from the 3 chickens that had somehow survived Daniel's financial pillaging, and rationed the canned goods in the pantry with the careful precision of someone facing genuine starvation. The isolation was perhaps the cruelest aspect of her new reality. Friends who had been regular visitors during her marriage seemed to evaporate as word of the divorce spread through their small community. Some genuinely didn't know how to help, while others appeared to view her misfortune as potentially contagious, as if associating with a woman whose husband had publicly humiliated and abandoned her might somehow taint their own carefully constructed lives. The loneliness was a physical ache that settled deep in her chest, making even the simplest tasks feel monumentally difficult. Winter arrived early that year, bringing with it a harsh cold that seemed to seep through every crack in the old farmhouse. Maya burned furniture for warmth when the firewood ran out, watching pieces of her former life literally go up in smoke. She wore every piece of clothing she owned in layers, slept under every blanket and quilt she could find, and still woke each morning with her breath visible in the frigid air. The romantic notion of rural self-sufficiency that had once attracted her to farm life revealed itself as a brutal reality that demanded skills and resources she simply didn't possess. It was during one particularly harsh snowstorm, when Maya was burning the last of the kitchen chairs to keep from freezing, that she found her grandmother's journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the attic. Alina Chen had been a formidable woman who had survived the Japanese occupation of Taiwan, immigrated to America with nothing but determination and a handful of seeds sewn into the lining of her coat, and built a successful market garden that had supported 3 generations of their family. The journal was written in a mixture of English and Mandarin, chronicling not just agricultural techniques, but the philosophical approach to survival that had sustained Alina through decades of hardship. When the soil is poisoned, you don't abandon the land, Maya read by candlelight, translating her grandmother's careful calligraphy. You heal it slowly, with patience and respect, knowing that what appears dead may only be sleeping. The words resonated with a power that seemed to transcend their agricultural context, speaking directly to the devastation in Maya's own life. Elena's journal became her survival manual, its pages filled with practical advice about crop rotation, companion planting, and natural pest control, but also deeper wisdom about resilience, adaptation, and the slow work of restoration. The turning point came on a morning in late February when Maya woke to find that the old well had finally run completely dry. Standing in her kitchen, staring at the empty bucket she had hauled up from the depths, she faced a choice that would define the rest of her life. She could surrender, admit defeat, and walk away from the farm that had cost her everything. Or she could fight back with the ferocity of a woman who had nothing left to lose. The decision crystallized was startling. Clarity: she would not simply survive, she would transform both herself and the land that Daniel had left her as a final insult. The journey back to life began with the well. Using Elena's journal as a guide, Maya learned that the original well had been dug in the wrong location, positioned for convenience rather than following the natural water table. Armed with nothing but determination and a rusty shovel, she began digging a new well by hand, following the path of an underground stream that Elena's journal indicated should run beneath the eastern slope of the property. The work was backbreaking, each day bringing bloody blisters and muscles that screamed in protest. But after 2 weeks of relentless effort, Maya struck water that ran clear and cold and sweet. News of Maya's situation had quietly spread through the community, carried by the gossip network that connected every small town, and help began arriving in unexpected forms. Marcus Hartwell, a retired engineer who lived 5 miles down the valley, appeared one morning with a truck full of tools and an offer to help repair the farmhouse. He had heard about her struggles through his wife, who worked at the bank where Maya's loan payments had been consistently late, and he couldn't stand the thought of a neighbor suffering when he had the skills to help. Marcus was followed by others: Janet Morrison, the librarian who brought boxes of books on sustainable agriculture and small-scale farming; Dr. Sarah Kim, who provided medical care in exchange for the vegetables Maya was slowly coaxing from the soil; Father Miguel Santos from the local Catholic church, who organized a work party to repair the roof and never once asked about Maya's religious beliefs or lack thereof. These people became Maya's chosen family, offering not pity but practical support and genuine friendship. The farm began to recover under Maya's increasingly confident management. She abandoned the expensive, chemical-intensive methods Daniel had favored, returning to the organic principles that had originally inspired their agricultural dreams. Using Elena's journal and advice from Marcus and other community members, Maya developed innovative solutions to the challenges she faced. She built raised beds from reclaimed lumber, created a composting system that turned organic waste into rich soil amendments, and designed a rainwater collection system that ensured she would never again be at the mercy of a failed well. Maya's first crop was modest but successful: heritage tomatoes, leafy greens, and herbs that she sold at the local farmers market. Her produce quickly gained a reputation for exceptional quality and unique varieties that couldn't be found anywhere else in the region. She specialized in Asian vegetables that served the growing immigrant population in nearby towns. Crops that reminded people of home and connected them to their cultural heritage through food. The unexpected success attracted attention from an unlikely source. Isabella Rodriguez, a food blogger with a massive online following, discovered Maya's stand at the farmer's market and was intrigued by the story behind the unusual vegetables. Isabella's subsequent blog post about the Phoenix farm rising from ashes went viral, bringing customers from hundreds of miles away to taste Maya's produce and hear her story. The article portrayed Maya not as a victim but as a warrior, a woman, who had transformed betrayal into strength and created something beautiful from the ruins of her former life. The increased attention brought both opportunities and complications. Restaurant owners from the city began contacting Maya directly, eager to secure exclusive access to her unique produce. Food Network expressed interest in featuring her farm on a show about agricultural innovation. Seed companies offered lucrative contracts for her to grow specialty crops. But the success also attracted unwanted attention from Daniel, who saw the growing value of the property he had so callously abandoned. Daniel's return came without warning on a humid August morning, arriving in a rented BMW with a team of lawyers and an expression of calculated charm that Maya recognized from their early courtship. He had heard about the farm's success through mutual acquaintances and had come to reclaim what he considered his rightful share of the property. The cryptocurrency venture with Vivian had failed spectacularly, leaving him financially devastated and legally vulnerable, and he viewed Maya's transformed farm as his salvation. "You've done remarkable work here, Maya," Daniel said, his voice carrying the practiced sincerity of a seasoned manipulator. "I always knew you had potential. That's why I think we should discuss reconciliation." His lawyers presented documents, claiming that his signature on various farm-related contracts gave him legal standing to demand a portion of the current profits. Despite having abandoned both Maya and the property during its darkest period, Maya listened to his proposal with the patience of someone who had learned to hear what people weren't saying as clearly as their spoken words. Daniel spoke of second chances and renewed partnerships, but his eyes kept calculating the value of the improvements she had made, the equipment she had purchased, the customer relationships she had built. He wanted to harvest the fruits of her labor without acknowledging the depths of her suffering or the strength she had discovered in his absence. "No," Maya said simply, the single word carrying more power than any elaborate speech. "This farm belongs to me now. Not legally, because it always did, but in every way that matters. You can file whatever lawsuits you want, but you'll be fighting a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to protect." The lawyers shifted uncomfortably as Maya's quiet determination filled the space between them like gathering storm. Clouds. Daniel's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the frustrated entitlement beneath his polished exterior. "You can't build something from nothing, Maya," he said, his voice taking on the dismissive tone she remembered so well. "Everything you have here started with my investment, my planning, my connections. You're living in a fantasy if you think you can succeed without me." Maya smiled then, an expression of genuine amusement that seemed to catch Daniel off guard. "You're absolutely right," she said. "I couldn't have built this without your investment. Your abandonment taught me self-reliance. Your betrayal showed me who my real friends were. Your contempt motivated me to prove you wrong. I should probably thank you." The words hit their target with surgical precision, and Daniel left without another word, though Maya knew the legal battle was far from over. The lawsuit that followed was brutal and public, attracting media attention that Maya neither wanted nor enjoyed. Daniel's lawyers painted her as an opportunistic gold digger who had manipulated the divorce settlement to gain control of valuable agricultural assets. They brought Vivian as a character witness, a woman who testified that Daniel had shared his plans to develop the farm into a luxury eco-resort before Maya's mental breakdown forced him to abandon the project for everyone's safety. Maya's defense was led by Patricia Wang, a fierce attorney who specialized in domestic abuse cases and recognized the patterns of financial manipulation in Daniel's behavior. Patricia helped Maya document the years of controlling behavior, the isolation from friends and family, the gradual erosion of her autonomy that had culminated in the devastating theft of her inheritance. The case became a rallying point for women's rights organizations, drawing supporters who saw Maya's struggle as representative of countless women who had been financially abused by their partners. The trial revealed shocking details about Daniel's deception that even Maya hadn't fully understood. Bank records showed that he had been siphoning money from their accounts for over 3 years, funding not just his affair with Vivian, but also gambling debts and failed business ventures. The cryptocurrency investment that had supposedly justified his betrayal had never existed. The money had simply disappeared into offshore accounts controlled by Vivian's ex-husband, a convicted con artist who had vanished with the funds months before Daniel discovered the truth. Maya won the lawsuit decisively, but the victory felt hollow in the face of everything she had endured. Daniel was ordered to pay restitution he couldn't afford and faced potential criminal charges for fraud and forgery. Vivian, it emerged, had been playing a long con that left both Maya and Daniel as her victims, though Maya felt little sympathy for the man who had chosen greed over love. The legal victory brought Maya more than financial vindication. It brought her story to national attention in a way that transformed both her life and her farm's mission. Women from across the country began reaching out, sharing their own stories of financial abuse and asking for advice about rebuilding their lives. Maya realized that her personal healing could become a catalyst for community transformation if she was willing to embrace a larger purpose. Maya converted the old barn into a learning center, where she offered workshops on sustainable agriculture, financial literacy, and small business development. The programs were specifically designed for women who had experienced financial abuse or domestic violence, providing practical skills alongside emotional support. Participants learned to grow their own food, manage their finances independently, and develop income streams that couldn't be controlled or stolen by abusive partners. The transformation of the farm into a healing community attracted attention from social workers, therapists, and agricultural extension agents who recognized the innovative integration of practical and emotional support. Maya partnered with local domestic violence shelters to provide transitional housing in converted farm buildings, creating a safe space where women could rebuild their lives while learning skills that would support their independence. The work was emotionally demanding, requiring Maya to revisit her own trauma repeatedly as she helped others navigate similar experiences. Some days the weight of collective pain felt overwhelming, and Maya struggled with the responsibility of being seen as a symbol of resilience when she still had moments of doubt and sadness. The healing wasn't linear for her any more than it was for the women she served, and she learned to model the kind of self-compassion she encouraged in others. One of Maya's most unexpected challenges came from an investigative journalist named Thomas Chen, who shared her surname but claimed no family relationship. Thomas was working on an exposé about the exploitation of vulnerable women by agricultural programs that promised empowerment while providing cheap labor. His initial investigation of Maya's farm was hostile and suspicious, based on tips from unnamed sources who claimed she was exploiting her participants financially and emotionally. Thomas spent weeks at the farm, interviewing participants and examining financial records with the thoroughness of someone convinced he would uncover malfeasance. Maya granted him complete access, confident that transparency would vindicate her work, but also recognizing that any successful program would eventually face scrutiny from those who benefited from maintaining existing power structures. The investigation revealed something Thomas hadn't expected: a genuinely transformative program that empowered women without exploiting them. Participants weren't cheap labor, but full partners in agricultural enterprises that provided fair wages and ownership. Opportunities. The financial structure was completely transparent, with profits shared equitably among all contributors. Most importantly, women were free to leave at any time with no financial penalties, and many had gone on to start their own successful businesses using skills learned at the farm. Thomas's subsequent article became a powerful endorsement of Maya's work, but it also attracted unwanted attention from agricultural corporations and development companies, who saw the farm's success as a threat to their business models. Anonymous complaints were filed with regulatory agencies, claiming health code violations and financial irregularities. Inspections were surprisingly frequent and thorough, clearly designed to find justification for shutting down the operation. Maya fought these challenges with the same determination she had brought to digging her new well, but the constant pressure was exhausting. She began to understand why so many social justice initiatives failed, not from lack of support, but from the relentless obstacles placed by those who profited from the status quo. The fight was no longer just about her personal survival, but about protecting a community of women who depended on the farm for their safety and future. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Elena's journal contained references to a historical designation that had never been properly filed. The original farm had been a stop on the Underground Railroad, providing shelter for escaped slaves traveling north to Canada. Maya worked with historians and legal experts to document this history and secure historic preservation status for the property, which protected it from many forms of regulatory harassment and provided access to grants for historic preservation and educational programming. The historic designation also revealed a deeper truth about the land's purpose. It had always been a place of refuge and transformation for people seeking freedom from oppression. Maya's work was part of a continuum that stretched back generations, connecting her grandmother's immigrant struggle, the escaped slaves who had found shelter in the barn, and the women who now came to heal from domestic violence and financial abuse. This revelation inspired Maya to expand her vision beyond individual healing to systemic change. She began partnering with universities to research the connections between agricultural sustainability and social justice, documenting how land-based healing programs could address both environmental and social problems simultaneously. The farm became a living laboratory where academic researchers worked alongside community members to develop replicable models for rural economic development. Maya's personal life had been so focused on survival and service that she had little energy left for romance. But connections have a way of emerging when we're focused on purposes larger than ourselves. Dr. James Lightfoot was an agricultural economist who came to study the farm's innovative, cooperative structure and stayed to become Maya's research partner, eventual lover, and ultimately her husband in a small ceremony held in the same barn where she had once burned furniture to stay warm. James brought his own history of loss and recovery. His first wife had died in a car accident, leaving him to raise their daughter alone while building his academic career. His approach to Maya was patient and respectful, never trying to rescue her, but offering partnership and intellectual companionship that enriched her work and her life. Their relationship was built on shared values and mutual respect, rather than the passionate dependency that had characterized her marriage to Daniel. Maya's stepdaughter, Anna, was initially skeptical of her father's new partner, but the farm provided neutral ground where they could develop their own relationship. Anna was fascinated by the combination of agriculture and social justice, eventually choosing to write her senior thesis on sustainable farming as a tool for community development. The research brought her into close collaboration with Maya, creating bonds based on shared intellectual interests rather than forced familial relationships. The farm's success attracted national attention that culminated in Maya being invited to speak at the United Nations about rural women's economic empowerment. Standing before representatives from around the world, Maya shared not just her personal story, but the larger narrative of how land-based healing could address multiple forms of trauma simultaneously. She spoke of soil restoration as a metaphor for personal recovery, of sustainable agriculture as a model for sustainable communities, and of the power of women supporting women across cultural and economic boundaries. The UN speech led to invitations to consult on agricultural development projects in countries where women faced even greater challenges than those Maya had encountered. She traveled to Kenya to help design cooperative farming programs for women escaping female genital mutilation, to Guatemala to work with indigenous women protecting their traditional seeds from corporate exploitation, and to Bangladesh to develop flood-resistant farming techniques that could support climate refugees. These international experiences expanded Maya's understanding of both privilege and oppression, showing her how her struggles, while genuine and transformative, existed within a global context of much greater hardship. She returned from each trip with renewed appreciation for the resources available in her own community and deeper commitment to using those resources to support women who faced even greater obstacles. The farm celebrated its 10th anniversary of Maya's ownership with a festival that drew visitors from around the world. Former participants returned to share their success stories. Researchers presented findings about the program's effectiveness, and politicians spoke about the need for more initiatives that combined environmental and social healing. The celebration was also a farewell, as Maya announced her decision to transition from direct operation of the farm to establishing a foundation that would replicate the model in other locations. Maya's decision to step back from daily operations wasn't about retirement, but about scaling impact. The foundation she established with James began developing farm-based healing centers in rural communities across the country, each adapted to local conditions and needs, but sharing the core principles of combining agricultural sustainability with social justice. Maya served as the foundation's director, traveling constantly to support new sites while maintaining her home base at the original farm. The work took on new urgency as climate change increased both environmental and social stresses in rural communities. Maya found herself advocating not just for sustainable agriculture, but for comprehensive approaches to climate adaptation that centered the needs of the most vulnerable populations. The farm became a demonstration site for regenerative practices that could sequester carbon while providing economic opportunities for marginalized women. Maya's story had begun with betrayal and abandonment, but it had evolved into something much larger than personal recovery. She had become a symbol of transformation, not just for individuals, but for entire communities, demonstrating how crisis could become opportunity when met with determination, community support, and a willingness to serve purposes larger than individual success. Standing in the same kitchen where she had discovered Daniel's betrayal 15 years earlier, Maya reflected on the woman she had become and the community she had helped create. The house was filled with laughter and conversation as the Foundation's board met to plan the next phase of expansion. The room that had once echoed with her sobs now resonated with the voices of women from around the world, planning how to bring healing and empowerment to their own communities. The transformation was complete, not because Maya had achieved some final state of perfection, but because she had learned to see crisis as invitation, betrayal as opportunity, and personal healing as the foundation for collective liberation. The farm that Daniel had left her as a burden had become her greatest gift, not just to herself, but to the hundreds of women whose lives had been transformed by the work that began in that dark kitchen on a February morning when Maya chose survival over surrender. Maya's legacy would ultimately be measured not in personal success, but in the network of healing communities that grew from the seeds of her own transformation. Each one adapted to local conditions, but sharing the fundamental belief that land and people heal together, that women supporting women can change the world, and that the deepest tragedies can become the richest soil for the most beautiful growth.